Hello, everyone. Welcome to Trade and Connectivity Challenge 2021 virtual briefing session with Cartrack. My name is Billy Law, representing Agorize and Enterprise Singapore as the moderator of this session. Today, it is our pleasure to have Richard from the Cartrack team to walk us through the ins and outs of their challenge statements, awaiting for your solution. So the rundown for today's session is fairly straightforward. We'll start off with Richard presenting the first challenge statement, which is an educational mobile platform solution that can help raise awareness of drivers' driving behaviors, recommend measures that should be undertaken, and reward safe and eco-friendly driving. Then we'll go on to the first Q&A session based on the first statement. And then we'll go back to the presentation of the second challenge statement, which is a robust digital client onboarding solution that allows SME customers from various geographies to quickly capture details of contracts, pricings, and special requirements arising from individual negotiations. That will proceed to the second Q&A session based on this second statement. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to submit your questions on the Q&A panel of this Zoom webinar. And please note that this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded on the challenge platform at tradeandconnectivity.innovation-challenge.sg for future viewing. So now, without further ado, over to you, Richard. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me first start by thanking both the Enterprise Singapore and Agorize teams for this opportunity. So just a bit of background before we start. Cartrack is a mobility data analytics company focusing on smart transportation. So we provide software as a service platforms that both focus on vehicles and drivers, and the core focus is to increase efficiency, decrease costs, improve safety, as well as provide regulatory and compliance monitoring. At this point in time, we operate in 23 countries and have over 1.4 million vehicles that we manage through our platform. So jumping straight into challenge one. So for challenge one, an educational mobile platform that can help to raise awareness of drivers' driving behaviors, recommending measures that should be undertaken, and reward safe and eco-friendly driving. So what does that mean in a nutshell? Let's make it a little bit more simple. We've all been in a taxi or a bus or seen a bad driver. And it's a big challenge for owners of vehicles to coach these drivers and make them better drivers. At this point in time, a lot of the coaching platforms, once you have the data, that information is used typically long after the fact. A typical driver might, at the end of the week, when they go back to their office, be told that on Monday morning you were driving badly, you were speeding. By then, the driver's not interested. They have no context as to what this means, when they were doing it wrong, what they were doing. So the coaching doesn't really happen. They don't get trained how to resolve these issues. What drivers need is real-time behavioral modification. When they are doing a behavior that is considered bad, when they are speeding, when they're driving fatigued, when they're not driving the vehicle in the most economical manner, they need to be informed straight away. That's the only way they'll correct their behavior. Driver coaching is also troublesome for companies. You have a fleet manager who has a large number of staff, and he's trying to make them all drive and be better than each other, but it's often quite unsuccessful. We believe gamification is the way to resolve this issue. Find ways to reward drivers and motivate drivers to improve their driving style, as well as contextualize this data both across their organization, their industry, and the world. This allows a driver to see, are they the best driver or best logistics driver in the organization? Are they best in the country? Are they best in the region? Are they best in the world? Comparing metrics allows an organization to also understand where they fit in. How safe are their drivers compared to their peers? So the details, all the requirements for this product are fairly simple. Firstly, there's a set of data that's input from a telematics device. So the telematics device within the Cartrack vehicles provides this information. At the end of each trip, when a driver has finished driving a trip, this information would be pushed to you, the startup. This information would include things like speeding. If there was a fatigued driver, if the driver was smoking, how many times did the driver have a lane departure warning when they didn't indicate? How often did they have a safe distance warning when they drove too close to the vehicle in front of them? As well as eco-related information. ESG compliance is a big, an important part of business these days. So making sure that the vehicle is driven efficiently, making sure the driver isn't revving the vehicle excessively, whether it's a fuel consumption in a traditional fuel or whether it's an electric vehicle, accelerating harshly and very, very fast is bad in both cases. So this information would be pushed to the startup at the end of each trip for every driver as a metric of identifying what was the last trip. This trip that person just drove from A to B, what was the trip like? What were all the metrics involved in the trip? Also, this information is not always standardized across the different vehicle types. For example, fatigue might come from a camera that detects fatigue. It also might come from driving times where someone has driven nonstop for 6 hours, which shows that they will be fatigued in their driving behavior. So the potential challenges we see in this challenge is the drivers. So no one will ever admit they're a bad driver. Everyone thinks they're an absolutely fantastic driver. So we need to find ways to show this to the driver and provide the metrics to the driver to show them how they must improve. Provide this information in an easy way that they will be engaged with the application. They'll want to go back to the application. They won't just use the application once and not be interested anymore. It's also important that the app will be used in the vehicle in many cases. It can't be used while driving. It mustn't distract or provide safety risks to the drivers where they are. We also need to support a wide range of drivers. Drivers in different industries have very different technical knowledge and different age groups and different skills. We need to provide an easy-to-use platform that anyone can use. It's also important to weigh the metrics. By that we mean certain customers have certain requirements to highlight issues. So speeding in certain customers is more important than revving the vehicle. And weighing the various input metrics makes sure we focus on the right areas. It's also important when we provide this information to the driver to provide the most modern methods of providing the information. A typical example would be, you don't want to tell the driver, you are the worst driver there is. You rather want to say, there's 200 people that are better than you. You need to find ways to provide this information in a meaningful, comprehensive way that drivers understand it and are willing to take action to it. We also believe that UX UI is key to a success in a product like this. Simple, usable interfaces will make sure the drivers adopt this product. So what's the desired outcome? At the end of the day, improve the driver's behavior. And this we will see if we lower the number of events detected from the telematics device. If the driver speeds less, or we detect less fatigue interactions, those prove that the system is working. Obviously, the other important parts of the product are making sure there's good product adoption across the various segments. It has to be simple to use. It has to be meaningful recommendations that a customer or driver can understand. And gamification, where you can rate yourself against your peers, we believe is the way forward in this industry. Fair scoring and weighting is also important. A driver must trust the data that they're receiving and understand the data. So it's very important to make sure that how we present to the the data to them is very clear. So that covers the requirements. Billy, do you want to go through the Q&A section?
Yes, great. Thanks, Richard, for the very comprehensive presentation on the first statement. So now we open the floor to the attendees. If you have any questions on for the training statement number 1. So let's just give a couple of seconds. Oh, here we go. We have the first question. The question is if this is applicable to any specific regions, given the differences of driving laws in different locations.
So we wanted a universal application. Yes, there are specific driving laws that change in regions. However, speeding is speeding. Falling asleep at the wheel is falling asleep. We don't believe that taking into specific regions metrics is that important in this application. It's more important to take the data that we have and provide a common platform and a simple way to use it. We're not providing metrics that would be very localized. And this, for example, the overspeeding information that I alluded to in the previous example, that information is localized to regions and will take whether it's Singapore's or Thailand's road speeds into account when we generate that information. So there's no specific regionalization required, except obviously languages.
Okay, great, thanks. And we have the second question on, is there any training being performed so far?
So the current way that training is provided is very old school. A customer would take a report at the end of the month that would then have a list of all the drivers, and it would take all the drivers and it would then have columns and say, person A is speeding too much, person B is driving too long hours, person C is doing the next thing. And this list of items would then be up to a fleet manager to provide individual coaching to those staff members. Generally, there might be awareness programs that we would send to a customer that the entire organization would understand. But once someone has behaved badly and they're not driving as efficiently as possible, that would be a one-on-one coaching where the fleet manager would go to the driver and say, if you don't rev so much, we're going to save fuel. If you don't speed so much, we're not going to have so many fines, and have to go through with the driver each item. So it's a very onerous process at the moment. That's why we're looking for a platform that can push this data directly to the driver, that he doesn't have to be told next week what he did wrong 5 minutes ago.
All right, great. Thanks, Richard, for the explanation. Are there any more questions from the floor? Okay. If not, then with Richard, we can move on to the second statement.
Okay, great. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second statement, this is more a back-end tool. So we want to provide a robust digital client onboarding solution that allows small to medium enterprise customers from various geographies to quickly capture contract details, pricing, and special arrangements. So what does this mean? In lots of cases, many of us have seen receive a contract. Let's call it a contract for a cell phone or for any kind of application. These applications have fine print and various information needs to be completed. What happens at the moment, these applications are customized to the region. So we're trying to find a way to make sure that we have a centralized automated system that can capture all the information, no matter whether you're in Singapore, Thailand, Brazil, in a central system and capture it in the local format. So this sounds fairly easy, but there are a number of challenges. So there's challenges like local languages. Those are fairly easy. There's local currencies. The local currencies sound simple, but there's also local taxes. if you take a country like Thailand, for example, different organizations qualify for different tax rates. So there's a complexity all of a sudden. Validation of data also becomes challenging. A company code in one country could be 10 digits, in another country it could be 15. You want to validate data that whenever a customer enters this data, that it is as correct as possible, because we all make mistakes. Then there's things like address validation. Someone in Singapore would use a postal code. From a postal code, you can pretty much tell where the customer is. In other regions, postal codes aren't efficient. You have to do a much more detailed dive where you have an address or a region. And in some cases, you even need a map where someone can click on a map and say, this is where I am. There's also region-specific data that's very government regulated. So we're in the monitoring business. We monitor people's vehicles. There's certain regulations, for example, in a country like Thailand, that a waste truck would have to have a certain regulation and a certain kind of monitoring system put into it. The same rules apply for certain ports in certain countries. So based on customer input, the whole content of the application and contract needs to change. It's also important after the fact to make sure that this is a legal contract. And these days, people need to have a way of signing it. So there's applications that are very, very similar to something like DocuSign, but DocuSign has an existing template. We want something much more versatile that can, from the input, detect what country you're in, customize it to the country, query the information, and evolve during the onboarding of the customer. So the requirements are fairly simple in this. It's providing full support for regions and languages and ways to add a new region. If an organization were to start selling in Vietnam and they hadn't before, we need to make sure that that new language could be onboarded easily and the local regulations could be added easily. Make sure that the workflows and approval processes are easy to do. Enterprise contracts are rarely a fixed value that you see on an internet. There might be a place where a customer wants to pay $10 and then the decision is after negotiation they're going to pay $9. Those processes need to be able to be managed throughout this tool. Okay. There's also appointments for customers, which we call scheduling. In lots of cases, you need to go to a customer and install a device or arrange training. That process of making sure they're available needs to be managed throughout this system. Also, the document requirements and payment methods. In Singapore, we have Gyro, which is a common debit order system, but it's a very localized system. There's competitive systems in all other countries. The system needs to understand those payment methods and take advantage of them and show them and process them accordingly. It's also important that this system will be pushed into our ERP system. So the data coming from this needs to integrate to the corporate ERP system, as well as support various communication channels. Communicating with customers is constantly evolving. WhatsApp, for example, or a line in Thailand, or Viber in the Philippines, is an important communication method. Once a customer is on board, they expect to receive messages and updates through these more modern social channels, not just an email. Email is dead in a way. People want much easier ways to communicate, and they want communication to be fast. And we need to support these more modern approaches. Also, after the fact, customers and employees, both ourselves and the customer, needs to manage these contracts. You need to be able to go into a system, see what they are, have all the details of when it was signed, when it was approved, and what happened along the way. So what's the outcome for this? We need a simple technology that can onboard, that manages the localization, that manages the workflow, includes the scheduling capabilities, integrates into ERPs, and is also cost effective, that as we evolve and add countries, this system can grow with us. Billy, going back to you, any more questions from the...
Great, thanks, Richard. So now, if the attendees, if you have any questions on the second statement, or even if you have questions on the first one, you can also ask now. And while we are waiting, if the attendees have any other questions, maybe if there's anything the team would like to add on, maybe. Not sure if anyone else is here with you, Richard. Or if there's any other links that you'd like to add.
Now, obviously, our contact details are on the challenge statements. If there's any questions, we'd welcome email and any communication from anybody, and we'd welcome any comments or any way we could help along the process.
Okay, let's just give a couple of seconds and see if there's any questions, or else I think we're pretty good. So right now you might be needing some time to process, to digest the information. But if you have any questions later on, you're free to ask on the challenge platform. But we have one question here. Is there a prototype POC development timeline that we are looking at?
Okay, so I think like everyone, we love it delivered tomorrow, but I suppose that's a little bit unrealistic. I think it's important to make sure that there's a scoping phase to this and a realistic timeline. But we understand, because we have a development team, that these things don't take days or weeks, they take months. So we want to do it as efficiently and as fast as possible, but we do realize that there's a time involved, and we'll accept within the presentation any realistic timelines that we could negotiate and communicate with that specific startup.
Great, thanks. Okay, I think these are all the questions, which means you did a great job, Richard, in presenting it very detailed and very clear. And I also hope that today's session also gave some new insights and better clarity to the attendees. So we're looking forward to seeing your submissions by the end of this year, which is December 30th. If you're new to us here, new to TCC, we sincerely invite you to register at tradeandconnectivity.innovation-challenge.sg. And I think that's a wrap. Any closing remarks from you, Richard?
No, I just want to thank everyone for joining and look forward to some exciting presentations.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard, and thank you all the attendees here today. Have a great rest of the day. We're looking forward to seeing you very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.